My name is Elena Vance, and I am 29 years old. Exactly 6 months ago, I boarded a red-eye flight from Seattle to Chicago. The occasion? My older sister Chloe's lavish wedding. But when I stepped into the opulent lobby of the venue and gave my name to the receptionists, their welcoming smiles evaporated into profound confusion. They ran their manicured fingers down the immaculate guest list once, twice, and then a third time before looking up at me with eyes full of unbearable pity. "I am so sorry, miss. Your name simply isn't here." I stepped aside and called my sister, hoping there had been a clerical error. Instead, her voice dripped with condescension through the speaker. "Did you seriously think I'd invite you to this?" she scoffed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just quietly turned away. But before I walked out those grand double doors, I placed my wedding gift on the velvet-draped reception table. It was just a small, navy blue velvet box. A few hours later, when Chloe gleefully pried it open in front of 350 high society guests, the contents utterly obliterated the fake reality she had spent her entire life constructing. My phone hasn't stopped vibrating since that night, but I haven't picked up once. Before I reveal exactly what was hiding inside that velvet box, I need you to do me a quick favor. Take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, but only if you're already hooked on this story. While you're at it, drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from and what time it is right now. To make sense of why a single, tiny box completely dismantled my sister's empire, you need to understand the toxic ecosystem I was raised in. I grew up in a sprawling, historic Greystone in Chicago's Gold Coast. If you walked past our property, you'd assume we were the ultimate American dream. We were affluent, socially prominent, the kind of family that hosted galas and spent summers sailing on Lake Michigan. But behind those heavy oak doors, there were two daughters, and only one of them actually existed to our parents. Chloe was 3 years my senior, which apparently made her the crown prince. She possessed the master suite bedroom, the imported European wardrobe, the private violin tutors, and the elite recitals that my parents eagerly sat front row for. I, on the other hand, received the out-of-season hand-me-downs and an echoing, suffocating silence. The profound reality of my irrelevance hit me on my 10th birthday. I had been circling the date on my calendar for months. Turning 10 felt like a massive milestone. I had let myself fantasize about helium balloons, a bakery cake with my name piped in icing, maybe even a fraction of the celebration Chloe had received, a backyard carnival with a magician and 50 screaming classmates. When I bounded down the mahogany staircase that morning, my heart was racing. But the gourmet kitchen was completely dead. My mother was aggressively pacing with the phone pressed to her ear, finalizing the catering for Chloe's upcoming debutante mixer. My father was already gone, off to his corporate firm. Neither of them even blinked when I stood in the doorway. "Mom," I whispered, shifting my weight. "It's my birthday." She briefly pressed her hand over the phone's receiver, her eyes looking straight past me. "I know, honey. We'll order a pizza or something later." They never ordered the pizza. But later that night, as I sat alone on my carpet, a soft knock echoed from my bedroom door. It was Grandma Beatrice, my mother's mother. She walked in holding a beautifully wrapped rectangular box. "Happy birthday, my brilliant girl," she whispered, taking a seat beside me. When I tore the paper away, I didn't find a plastic toy or a generic doll. It was a heavy, vintage botanical pressing kit, complete with specialized pruning shears and thick, leather-bound preservation books. "You possess a creator's hands, Elena," she said, gently brushing my hair back. "Someday, the world is going to marvel at the things you can build." I was too young to comprehend it then, but those heavy shears and blank pages would chart the course of my entire existence. Grandma Beatrice knew exactly what she was nurturing. Fast forward 8 years. I graduated from high school with a full-ride scholarship to the Parsons School of Design, entering one of the most rigorous and prestigious floral and spatial design programs on Earth. Naively, I thought this academic triumph would finally force my parents to look at me with pride. The graduation commencement was scheduled for a bright Saturday afternoon. I had even been selected by the faculty to deliver a brief speech on the intersection of nature and architecture. I spent 3 weeks rehearsing it in front of a mirror, practically hallucinating the image of my mother wiping away a tear and my father giving me a stoic nod of approval. On the morning of the ceremony, I walked into the kitchen wearing my cap and gown. Chloe was lounging at the Marble Island, obsessively refreshing her social media. My parents were frantically reviewing documents over my father's tablet. "The commencement starts at 2, I announced, clutching my speech tightly. "We really need to hit the road by 1 if we want decent parking." My mother didn't even pause her scrolling. "Oh, honey, something urgent popped up." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. My father finally looked up, his expression lined with irritation. Chloe managed to secure a last-minute networking brunch with the VP of Chase Bank. It's a make-or-break opportunity for her financial career. We simply cannot pass it up. I stood frozen, the black fabric of my gown feeling like a lead weight. But it's my college graduation. Flower arranging is a hobby, Elena, not a legitimate profession, my father stated, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Maybe you should look into getting an MBA like your sister. Then we'd have something to celebrate." Chloe just took a slow sip of her latte, an arrogant smirk playing on her lips, and said absolutely nothing. I took an Uber to my college graduation alone. I stood at a podium and delivered my speech to a sea of strangers. And when the dean called my name to hand me my diploma, I scanned the massive auditorium and found exactly one familiar face: Grandma Beatrice. She was sitting in the front row, cheering louder than the parents of the valedictorian. After the ceremony, she wrapped my hands in hers. "Never forget this, my sweet girl," she murmured into my ear. "The most valuable treasures on this earth are rarely the ones people scream and fight over. Usually, they're the ones quietly handed down." I smiled, but I didn't fully grasp the magnitude of her words. Not yet. It would take a velvet box, a decade of silence, and a disastrous wedding for me to finally understand. The day after graduation, I packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. I didn't leave a note. There was literally no one waiting around to read it. For the next 10 years, I constructed my empire in absolute silence. I started at the absolute bottom, sweeping up stems and hauling massive buckets of dirty water for a commercial event florist. I absorbed every technique, memorized every vendor, and hoarded every dollar I made. Gradually, client by client, I began to forge my own brand. My family never once inquired about my livelihood. To them, I was still just poor Elena who plays with weeds. Chloe would ring me maybe twice a year, but it was never to check my pulse. It was strictly to narrate her own highlight reel. She became the regional VP of marketing at 32, bought a loft downtown, and got engaged to a prominent hedge fund heir. Every single phone call was a theatrical performance, and I was the mandatory audience. I just locked down a massive corporate sponsorship deal, she gloated one rainy Tuesday. "What about you? Still doing those cute little table centerpieces?" When she said that, I was actively sitting behind a massive oak desk in my penthouse studio space, overlooking the Seattle skyline. My walls were lined with industry awards, and my current client roster included A-list actors and international politicians. "I'm keeping busy, Chloe. Truly, congratulations on your deal." "Yeah, thanks. Look, Mom and Dad are hosting a huge celebratory dinner for me on Friday. Obviously, you're not on the list. It's strictly immediate family only." I let the phrase suffocate the air between us. "Immediate family." "Understood," I replied evenly. "I hope you all have a beautiful night." When I ended the call, I took a long look around my sanctuary. My company, Ophelia Blooms, had cleared $4.2 million in revenue the previous year. We were the premier floral and event architecture firm in the Pacific Northwest, employing a full-time staff of 15 brilliant designers. Chloe had zero idea. My parents were completely clueless. And for a very long time, I successfully convinced myself that their ignorance was a blessing. I told myself I had outgrown the need for their validation. But then, Grandma Beatrice passed away, and the tectonic plates of my life shifted forever. The notification came on a gloomy Thursday afternoon. I was deep in the middle of redlining vendor contracts when an unknown Chicago number lit up my screen. "Miss Vance?" My name is Arthur Pendleton. I served as your grandmother's legal counsel. It is with a heavy heart that I must inform you Beatrice passed away in her sleep last night. The oxygen drained from the room. Grandma Beatrice was 84. She had been physically deteriorating for a few years, but my brain had stubbornly convinced me there would be more time. Just one more flight home. One more cup of tea. One more opportunity to look her in the eyes and tell her she was the only reason I survived my childhood. I booked the next flight to O'Hare. The memorial took place at a towering, historic cathedral, packed to the rafters with artists, gallery owners, and musicians whose lives Beatrice had quietly funded. She was a titan of the local arts scene, a woman who worshipped beauty and bankrolled the dreamers who created it. I sat completely alone in the fourth row. My parents were stationed at the front, aggressively absorbing the condolences of the wealthy elite. Chloe stood beside them, draped in a custom black mourning dress, delicately dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue. But I couldn't help but notice the bizarre undercurrent. Between the somber hugs, Chloe kept shooting frantic looks at my mother, who would then furiously whisper to my father. "The Sapphire Collection," I lip-read Chloe muttering. "Did you pin down the lawyer on When We Can?" "Stop it, not in the sanctuary," my mother hissed back. "We will audit the estate tomorrow." I stared blankly at my grandmother's mahogany casket while my blood relatives mentally liquidated her assets like a pawn shop inventory. She deserved so much better than them. We all did. As the massive crowd began to disperse, a heavy hand rested on my shoulder. It was Arthur Pendleton, the attorney. He had kind, tired eyes and a thick silver beard. "Miss Vance," he said softly, "would you mind staying behind for a moment? Beatrice left specific instructions regarding something she wanted you to have." My chest tightened. Of course. I had no earthly idea that the envelope he was carrying would become the weapon that destroyed my sister's wedding. Mr. Pendleton guided me into a dimly lit administrative office behind the altar. He shut the heavy door, sat across from me, and carefully placed a thick manila envelope on the desk. "Your grandmother scheduled a private meeting with me about 2 years ago," he began, his tone incredibly serious. "She was fiercely specific about her final wishes. What I am about to disclose to you is entirely separate from the public your parents will see." He nudged the envelope toward my hands. Inside, there were 2 crisp legal documents and a folded piece of personalized stationery. I pulled out the first document, which was heavily stamped and notarized. I had to reread the bolded text 4 times before my brain translated the legal jargon. The Beatrice Heirloom Sapphire and Diamond Collection. Her entire vault of vintage jewelry, independently appraised at $3.1 million, was legally transferred to me. Not to Chloe. Not to my mother. Every single piece belonged to Elena. My hands shook violently as I unfolded the handwritten letter. "My brilliant Elena, if you are reading these words, I have left this world. But it is crucial that you understand the motivation behind my final act. Your sister, Chloe, views these jewels as royal crowns, status symbols meant to be paraded around to invoke jealousy. But you, my sweet girl, you view them as history. You understand that true beauty is never about possession. It is about preservation. Your mother and sister will be furious. They will scream that my mind was failing. But I have watched you blossom into an absolute force of nature, especially when you thought nobody was looking. These pieces belong on the skin of someone who will honor their legacy. They belong to you. Endless love. Grandma Beatrice." I crushed the letter against my chest, hot tears ruining the collar of my dress. "There is one final stipulation," Mr. Pendleton added softly. "Beatrice demanded that this legal transfer remain absolutely confidential until you, and only you, decide the time is right to bring it to light." I couldn't form words, so I just nodded. I slid the life-altering documents into my leather tote bag and walked out of the cathedral carrying a radioactive secret that I would harbor for the next 6 months. I didn't know it yet, but that secret was destined for a velvet box. 3 months after the burial, the grand announcement dropped. Chloe was officially engaged to Julian Sterling. Julian was the definition of New York old money. His grandfather practically built half the luxury high-rises in Manhattan. To my parents, this wasn't a marriage, it was a royal ascension. Wealth merging with deeper wealth. The ceremony was booked at the Drake, one of the most historically lavish hotels in Chicago. 350 VIP guests, an astronomical budget, every single napkin and fork meticulously curated for public consumption. I patiently waited for my thick, embossed invitation to arrive in the mail. Weeks dragged by. Nothing. I aggressively checked my mailbox. I scoured my spam folders. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the postal service lost it. Surely, my own flesh and blood wouldn't bar me from my only sister's wedding. When I couldn't take the suspense anymore, I called my mother. Mom, I haven't seen my invite for the wedding yet. Do you want me to just text Chloe my meal preference? The silence on the line was thick and suffocating. Elena, my mother began, her voice dripping with calculated caution. Chloe actually asked me to handle this conversation. My stomach plummeted. Handle what? It's just, the aesthetic of the wedding is extremely intimate. Chloe just felt it would be much less complicated if you didn't fly in. Intimate? I let out a dark, involuntary laugh. Mom, I literally just saw a sponsored post on her Instagram. She's hosting 350 people. Another long, agonizing pause. Look, you know how awkward you can get at these high society functions. We just don't want any weird family tension distracting from Chloe's perfect moment. I sat perfectly still, the phone burning against my cheek. I see, I whispered. Thank you for finally being honest, Mom. I killed the call. That night, I hate-scrolled through Chloe's social media feeds. I saw the VIP dress fittings, the yacht engagement party, the absurdly expensive registry links. Hundreds of strangers fawning over her in the comments. 350 seats in that ballroom, and she couldn't spare a single folding chair for her own sister. I stared at the glowing screen for nearly an hour. And then I made a very permanent decision. Now, I need to pause and ask you a genuine question. Put yourself in my shoes for a second. If your own family actively banned you from your sister's wedding and had the nerve to lie about it being a small gathering, how would you react? Would you crash the venue? Would you block their numbers and vanish into the night? Or would you orchestrate something else entirely? Leave your brutal honesty in the comments. I read all of them. And while you're typing, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the absolute chaos I unleashed next is something you do not want to miss. I booked my plane ticket exactly 72 hours before the ceremony. Seattle to Chicago. One way. I didn't warn my parents. I didn't ask for permission. I simply threw some clothes into a carry-on and prepared the only item that actually mattered, my wedding gift. It rested on my kitchen island inside a dark navy velvet box, tied with a pristine ivory ribbon. It was small enough to slide into my clutch and light enough that nobody would ever suspect the nuclear bomb hiding under the lid. The night before my flight, insomnia held me hostage. My brain spiraled, questioning if I was crossing a line. A massive part of me wanted to just lock my doors, stay in Seattle, and pretend none of them existed. It would have been safer. But the problem was I still cared. I cared that for 29 years, I had been a ghost in my own house. I had swallowed their neglect, their blatant favoritism, and their casual cruelty. I had built an empire 2,000 miles away and tried to convince myself it was a fair trade. It wasn't. I wasn't flying to Chicago to throw a tantrum or flip tables. I simply wanted to hand my sister a wedding gift. I wanted to force them to look at me, just once, as a human being who actually existed. At 5 a.m., I slipped into a tailored emerald green silk dress, swiped on a dark lipstick, and stared down my reflection. "You are not a ghost anymore," I whispered. I grabbed the velvet box, dropped it in my bag, and headed for the airport. I didn't know if opening it would trigger an apocalypse or absolute silence, but I knew I couldn't be the sole keeper of Grandma Beatrice's secrets anymore. The truth was going to break out, and Beatrice had specifically chosen me to hold the hammer. By the time I landed, the moment had finally arrived. The Drake Hotel was a monument to excess. Sweeping marble staircases, gold leaf ceilings, and floral arches in the lobby that I professionally knew cost upwards of 50 grand. A live harpist plucked away in the corner, while men in custom tuxedos and women in dripping diamonds filtered toward the grand ballroom. I stood on the perimeter of the wealth, my hand white-knuckling the velvet box in my purse. My pulse was thumping so aggressively against my ribs I thought I might pass out. I smoothed down my silk dress and confidently marched up to the mahogany reception desk. Two young women in crisp black blazers were manning a guest list that looked thicker than a dictionary. "Good evening," I said warmly. "I am here for the Vance Sterling wedding." "Wonderful. Last name, please?" "Vance. First name, Elena. I am the bride's sister." The receptionist beamed, looking down at her leather-bound binder. Her acrylic nail traced down the V's. She frowned, flipped a page, and dragged her finger down again. The warm smile instantly melted into a grimace. I am so sorry, Mississippi. I don't see your name on the master list. Could you double-check?" "VNC." The second receptionist leaned over to inspect the pages. "We have a Robert Vance, a Marion Vance, and the bride, Chloe Vance, soon to be Sterling." She looked up, her eyes swimming in uncomfortable pity. But no Elena. Behind them, the massive gilded doors to the ballroom were propped open. I could clearly see the towering crystal centerpieces, the endless rows of silver chairs, the hundreds of elites sipping top-shelf champagne. 350 people. But no Elena. The first receptionist swallowed hard. "Miss, would you like me to radio the wedding coordinator to come sort this out?" "No," I replied, my voice steady and cold. "Please don't. I will handle it." I pivoted away from the desk, pulled out my phone, and dialed Chloe. It rang twice before she picked up, the chaotic roar of the cocktail hour blaring in the background. "Hello." Her tone was annoyed, rushed. "Chloe, it's Elena." A heavy sigh crackled through the speaker. "What do you want?" I am literally in the middle of my reception. I am standing in the hotel lobby. The staff just told me I'm not on the guest list. Silence. I let it hang there. "Yeah, I'm aware," she finally snapped. "Because you weren't invited." Even though I knew it was coming, hearing the actual words felt like a knife to the ribs. "I am your sister, Chloe." She let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Did you seriously think you'd be invited?" "Elena, this event is for people who actually matter in society. Important network connections. Not someone who arranges weeds for a living." I squeezed my eyes shut. "I flew across the entire country. That sounds like a personal problem. I never told you to come." "You." "I just wanted to drop off my wedding gift," I interrupted. "To wish you a good life." "A gift?" She snorted in disgust. "What on earth could you possibly buy me that I don't already own?" "Let me guess. A homemade pressed flower frame? A coupon for a free bouquet?" I bit the inside of my cheek and let her talk. "Let me be crystal clear," Chloe hissed. "Nobody wants you here. Mom doesn't. Dad doesn't. And I sure as hell don't. You have always been a dark cloud hanging over this family. Turn around, get back on a plane, and go back to your pathetic little life in Seattle. Stop pretending you are on my level." I stood in the center of that palatial lobby, surrounded by strangers in ball gowns, and just let her venom wash over my skin. I could have screamed. I could have caused a massive scene and ruined her cocktail hour. Instead, I found a terrifying inner peace. "I understand," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I will just leave your gift on the reception table." "Fine. Whatever. Just don't embarrass me on the way out." She severed the connection. I pulled the phone away from my ear, and a slow, dark smile crept onto my face. Because I knew exactly what was ticking inside that velvet box, and I knew exactly how public her unboxing was going to be. The gift table was a grotesque shrine to capitalism. There were hundreds of massive boxes, Hermes orange, Tiffany blue, sleek metallic silver, alongside baccarat crystal vases and envelopes stuffed with terrifyingly large checks. I slowly approached it, the small navy box in my hand. The receptionist who had rejected me was watching me like a hawk, her face caught between sympathy and sheer bewilderment as to why the rejected sister was still lingering. I found a tiny pocket of empty space near the front edge of the table and placed my velvet box down. It looked incredibly modest next to the towering luxury gifts. Extremely easy to overlook, but also extremely easy to open. I fished a blank card out of my purse and slipped it beneath the ivory ribbon. "To Chloe. From your sister, Elena." "Excuse me, miss?" I turned. The receptionist had walked over, her voice soft. "Are you absolutely positive you don't want me to grab someone? I feel terrible." No, thank you. I offered her a genuine smile. Sometimes, the gifts speak a lot louder when the person who brought them is gone. She blinked, entirely unequipped to process that statement. I took one final, lingering look into the ballroom. Deep inside that gilded cage, my family was thriving. My mother was likely boasting about Chloe's billionaire in-laws. My father was probably swapping golf stories with CEOs. And Chloe was absorbing the worship she believed was her birthright. None of them were thinking about Elena. But they were going to be thinking about me very, very soon. I spun on my heels and marched out of the lobby, past the harpist, past the luxury cars, and straight out into the freezing Chicago air. I didn't look back once. I hailed a cab, climbed into the back seat, and immediately bought a ticket for the next red-eye back to Seattle. As the taxi merged onto the highway, I checked my watch. The dinner service was about to start. Soon, the cake would be cut. And soon, Chloe would reach for my box. But before I describe the absolute carnage that followed, I need to rewind the clock. I need to take you back 2 months, to the exact moment when the universe, or perhaps the ghost of Grandma Beatrice, decided to orchestrate the ultimate poetic justice. It was a mundane Wednesday. I was in my studio sketching a floral archway when my assistant, Maya, knocked on my glass door. "Elena? You have an incoming call." Someone named Evelyn Carmichael. My jaw dropped. Evelyn Carmichael was essentially royalty in the event planning world. She owned the most exclusive, high society event agency in the Midwest. She coordinated galas for senators and weddings for A-list celebrities. More importantly, she had been Grandma Beatrice's lifelong best friend. I snatched the receiver. "Evelyn, it's an absolute honor. It has been far too long, my dear." Evelyn's rich, commanding voice floated through the phone. "Beatrice used to talk my ear off about you. She was violently proud of the empire you built out there." A lump formed in my throat. "Thank you, Evelyn. I am calling you professionally today," she continued. "I am coordinating a wedding in Chicago. The bride is a nightmare of a perfectionist. She demands the absolute premier floral design in the country. And I told her Ophelia Blooms was the only acceptable option. I am incredibly flattered. Thank you for the referral. There is one minor detail you need to be aware of." Evelyn paused, and I could practically hear her smirking. "The bride is your sister." I stopped breathing. "Chloe? She officially signed your company's contract on Monday," Evelyn said smoothly. "She has absolutely no idea that you are the founder and CEO. She just obsessively stalked your firm's Instagram and demanded I book you. You knew, and you still pushed her to us? Your grandmother would have found this utterly hilarious, Elena. She always told me the truth has a funny way of clawing its way to the surface." Evelyn's tone turned serious. "The contract is executed. She paid the $18,500 non-refundable retainer. Whether you want to personally supervise the installation or let your team handle it is completely up to you." I stared out my massive windows at the Seattle skyline. My sister had just hired me. She signed a legally binding document with a luxury brand, totally oblivious to the fact that her loser sister was the puppet master. But there was another layer to the trap. 1 month before the wedding, Chloe hosted an elite bridal brunch. I got the full transcript via Evelyn, who heard it straight from the loose lips of the Chicago socialites. It was a 40-person brunch at the Ritz-Carlton. Bottomless mimosas, caviar, and Chloe holding court at the head of the table. The primary topic of conversation? The Beatrice Heirloom Sapphire Collection. "I'll be wearing Grandma's vintage sapphires for the reception," Chloe had loudly announced to her sycophants. The collection was just appraised at $3.1 million. It's essentially royal jewelry at this point. "Oh my God, it's so beautiful that she left them to you," a bridesmaid had fawned. Well, naturally, Chloe had gloated. I was always her favorite. Grandma knew I would actually display them in high society, unlike my sister, who couldn't tell the difference between a real diamond and plastic. My mother had been sitting right there, nodding proudly. "Your grandmother always wanted you to have them, Chloe. You were her shining star." What those two women didn't know was that the sapphires were already sitting in a private bank vault under my name. Chloe had been aggressively badgering Mr. Pendleton for months, trying to get the jewelry released for her wedding day. The lawyer kept politely stonewalling her, blaming probate court delays. She just assumed it was bureaucratic red tape. She had even hired a contractor to build a custom velvet-lined display case in her penthouse just to house the jewels. She had leveraged the collection to impress Julian's billionaire parents. She had spun a massive, glittering web of lies, genuinely believing she was entitled to the treasure. She was about to discover just how terribly wrong she was. And 350 of the most powerful people in the city were going to have front row seats. Now, back to the night of the wedding. My taxi dropped me at O'Hare just as a torrential rainstorm began to pound the city. The reception was in full swing by now. I found a quiet corner in the Delta Sky Club, ordered a black coffee, and stared blindly at the runway lights. My phone sat face up on the table, utterly silent. The bomb hadn't detonated yet. I thought about Beatrice. I thought about the heavy shears she gave me and the way she looked at me when the rest of the world looked right through me. The most valuable treasures are the ones quietly handed down. She had known perfectly well what a monster Chloe would grow into. She knew my parents would always be blinded by the shiny, loud daughter. So she made sure that when the clock ran out, I would be armed with undeniable truth. Not petty revenge. Just cold, hard facts. I checked my phone. 8:15 p.m. The four-course dinner was concluding. The MC would be hyping up the crowd, forcing everyone to pay attention as the new Mr. and Mrs. Sterling ceremoniously opened a few elite gifts before the cake cutting. My velvet box was waiting on the table. Inside that box lay a certified copy of Beatrice's amended will. Beneath that, the handwritten letter explaining exactly why Chloe was cut out. Beneath that, a Polaroid of me and Beatrice laughing outside a greenhouse. And folded at the very bottom was a thick sheet of paper, the Ophelia Bloom's floral contract, with my name boldly printed as the sole owner and CEO. I took a slow sip of coffee. Any second now, Chloe's entire false reality was going to violently collapse. Here is exactly what went down at the Drake while I was sipping coffee in an airport lounge. The ballroom was breathtaking. 100 circular tables smothered in imported silk, massive suspended floral installations dripping with white orchids, designed by my team, of course, and a 10-piece orchestra serenading the room. 350 titans of industry, socialites, and real estate moguls were comfortably buzzing on expensive wine. Chloe was practically glowing, draped in a custom Oscar de la Renta gown, diamond tennis bracelets sparkling under the chandeliers. Julian sat beside her looking like a quintessential Ralph Lauren model. My parents were seated at the grand head table, practically vibrating with smug satisfaction. My father was loudly bragging to Julian's father about the merger of their great families. No one mentioned the empty chair. No one questioned where the sister was. During cocktail hour, Chloe had been parading around the room, making sure everyone knew about her impending inheritance. "Just wait till you see the Sapphire collection," she had whispered to a group of Julian's aunts. "Over 3 million in heirloom stones. I'll be debuting them at the hospital gala next month." Now, as the plates were cleared, the MC tapped his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we cut this magnificent cake, our stunning bride and groom are going to open a few select gifts for us." Polite, wealthy applause echoed off the ceiling. A rolling table piled high with presents was pushed to the center of the dance floor. Sitting precariously on the edge, utterly dwarfed by a massive espresso machine box, was my tiny navy velvet box. Chloe floated to the table like royalty. "Let's see what we have," she chirped into the mic. She opened the first box, a pair of sterling silver champagne flutes. The second was a crystal caviar bowl. She offered practiced, glowing smiles for the cameras. Then, her manicured hand brushed against the velvet box. She picked it up, pulled out the little card, and a cruel, theatrical smirk crossed her face. "Oh wow," she announced into the microphone, making sure the entire room heard her. "A gift from my absent sister. The one who couldn't even manage to show up to her only sibling's wedding." A wave of awkward, hushed murmurs rippled through the front tables. Julian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Chloe, just open it," he muttered. "Let's see what she sent." "It's probably a coupon for her little flower shop," Chloe laughed, pulling the ivory ribbon loose. She lifted the lid. She reached inside and pulled out a thick, folded stack of legal paper. Her smile twitched. She unfolded the top document, her eyes scanning the heavy black ink and notary stamps. The color instantly drained from her face. She turned chalk white, then violently flushed, then white again. "What is it?" Julian asked, leaning in. Chloe couldn't speak. Her hands began to shake so violently that the handwritten letter slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the parquet floor. At the head table, my mother immediately sensed the panic. She practically sprinted over. "Chloe? Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Chloe shoved the legal document at my mother. This is a fake," she stammered, her voice amplified by the hot mic still near her face. "This can't be real. Grandma worshipped me. She would never." She trailed off. The entire ballroom of 350 guests was now dead silent, staring at the bride having a meltdown. But sitting in the bottom of that velvet box was the final piece of paper, the one she hadn't touched yet. My mother's eyes darted across the legal text, the notarized seal, the undeniable declaration that the $3.1 million sapphire collection was the exclusive property of Elena Vance. My mother gasped, physically stumbling backward. There has to be a clerical error." "It's not an error," Chloe shrieked, totally losing her composure. "Look at the date. 2 years ago, before she even got sick." The whispers in the crowd were growing louder now. People in the front rows were actively leaning out of their chairs. "Wait, isn't that the $3 million jewelry she was just bragging about?" a wealthy socialite loudly whispered to her husband. Chloe heard it. She whipped around, holding the papers up like a shield. "My sister forged this. Elena is an unstable, jealous liar. She faked these documents to ruin my life." My father stormed over, his face flushed with anger. He snatched the papers from my mother's hands. He read the will. Then he bent down and picked up Grandma Beatrice's letter from the floor. "Chloe sees these as crowns. Elena sees them as history. I know who will honor my legacy." My father's jaw locked. "Robert, tell me this is a sick joke," my mother pleaded. But my father couldn't lie. He recognized his own mother's distinct, cursive handwriting. He recognized her legal signature. And in that horrifying moment, he realized exactly how badly they had misjudged both of their children. "This is a lie." Chloe was fully sobbing now, tears ruining her flawless makeup. "Not today. Not in front of everyone." Julian, the groom, stood completely frozen. He was watching the elegant, perfect woman he thought he was marrying completely unhinged in front of his entire family. He looked horrified. "Wait," Julian's deep voice suddenly cut through the hysteria. He pointed at the velvet box. "There's another paper in there." Chloe looked down. Her trembling fingers reached into the box and pulled out the folded contract. It was the floral agreement for the wedding. She stared at the header. Ophelia Bloom's luxury event retainer. Her eyes dropped to the signature line. Client, Chloe Vance. Owner and creative director, Elena Vance. Amount paid, $18,500 non-refundable. "No," Chloe whimpered, dropping the paper like it was on fire. "No. No." Julian snatched the contract off the floor. His eyes bulged as he read the names. "Chloe, you hired her company? You literally told me your sister was a broke, mentally unstable failure who couldn't hold down a minimum wage job. You told me she was a charity case. I didn't know." Chloe screamed, her eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. "Where's the florist? Who set this up?" From the shadows near the bandstand, the lead floral designer of my Chicago crew stepped forward. She cleared her throat. "Excuse me, Mrs. Sterling. I am the lead designer for Ophelia Blooms. Miss Elena Vance is our CEO and founder. She just doesn't personally supervise on-site installations very often." "You work for her?" Chloe shrieked. The designer nodded slowly. "Ophelia Blooms is a multi-million-dollar firm. We're one of the top agencies in the country." The silence in the room was deafening. 350 of the most powerful people in the Midwest were collectively watching Chloe's entire facade burn to the ground. In the back row, A teenager had their iPhone out, clearly recording the entire disaster. "Wait, the sister owns the company," someone muttered loudly. "The one Chloe called a failure?" Julian was staring at the floral contract, his face hardening into absolute stone. "Chloe," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "What else exactly have you lied to me about?" Chloe just gaped at him, gasping for air. She spun around and frantically started digging for her phone. She needed to call me. She needed to scream, to threaten, to force me to fix the bomb I had detonated. But some explosions cannot be contained. Okay, I have to take a breath here. Raise your hand in the comments if you honestly saw that domino effect coming. Because I knew the jewelry would sting, but watching her realize she paid my company $18,000 for her own wedding flowers, that is next-level karma. If you're invested in how this ends, and trust me, the fallout is insane, smash that like button and keep watching. Because Chloe is about to find out that the truth has a lot of defenders. The ballroom was rapidly descending into chaos. Whispers mutated into loud, overlapping conversations. Chloe was hyperventilating at the head table, clutching her phone, while my parents looked like they were attending a funeral. That was when Evelyn Carmichael made her move. The legendary event planner stepped out from behind the curtain, her posture radiating absolute authority. She walked straight to the microphone, took it from the stunned MC, and looked out over the sea of guests. "If I may have your attention," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the noise like a scythe. The room instantly hushed. Evelyn picked up the legal wool from the table and held it up. "As the coordinator of this event, and as Beatrice's closest confidant for 4 decades, I can personally authenticate this document. I sat in the room when she signed this amendment 2 years ago. I witnessed her legal wishes." My mother pushed past a chair. "Evelyn, you can't be serious. Why would you do this?" "I didn't do anything, Marian," Evelyn replied coldly. "Beatrice did. She told me exactly why she made this decision." Evelyn leaned into the mic. She told me, "Chloe demands jewelry to wear as trophies. Elena treats them as memories. My older granddaughter never stopped asking me for money. My younger granddaughter never asked me for a single thing. That meant the world to Beatrice." The words hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Chloe's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. For the first time in her 32 years of life, she was entirely speechless. "There's something else that needs to be said." A new voice boomed from the center of the room. Jonathan Royce, a billionaire tech CEO and a close friend of Julian's father, stood up from his table. He buttoned his suit jacket and looked directly at the head table. "I happen to know Elena Vance," Jonathan declared loudly. "She flew out to design the floral architecture for my daughter's wedding in Malibu last spring. 600 guests. She was an absolute visionary." A collective gasp swept through the VIP tables. "Wait," a woman in a sequined gown raised her hand. "Elena Vance? As in Ophelia Blooms? They designed our charity gala last winter. They've been featured in Architectural Digest." Another wealthy guest chimed in. "I tried to book them for a corporate retreat and was told they have an 18-month wait list. They turned down A-list actors." Chloe was furiously shaking her head, looking completely deranged. "No, that's impossible. Elena plays with dirt. She is nobody." Jonathan Royce offered a pitying smile. "Actually, Chloe, your sister is remarkably successful. From what I read in her Forbes feature, her agency cleared over $4 million last year alone. She is easily one of the most elite designers on the West Coast." My mother gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. "4 million," she whispered, looking like she might throw up. My father stood frozen, staring at the floor. I knew that exact look. His corporate brain was rapidly calculating the data, destroying his old biases, and realizing the catastrophic error he had made. "She never told us a word of this," my father muttered numbly. "Why would she, Robert?" Jonathan Royce fired back. "From the sound of things tonight, it doesn't seem like your family was ever willing to listen." Chloe whipped around and grabbed Julian's arm. "Julian, please. This doesn't change us. She's just a jealous psycho trying to ruin my big day. She's..." "Chloe." Julian's voice was absolute ice. He pulled his arm out of her grip. "Stop. talking. Chloe froze. And in the suffocating silence that followed, the reality of her shattered life finally settled over the room. 2,000 miles away, sitting in the airport lounge, my phone screen suddenly lit up. It was Chloe. I watched her name flash, letting it ring out. Then she called again. And again. And again. By the 7th ring, my mother's contact name popped up. Then my father's. Then, the avalanche of text messages began. Chloe, pick up the phone, you psychopath. Chloe, you ruined my entire life. Mom, Elena, please call me right now. We need to talk about this. Dad, this behavior is unacceptable. You will call me and explain this forgery. Chloe, everyone is leaving. Julian won't look at me. I hate you. Mom, Elena, they're saying your business makes millions? Why didn't you tell us? I sat back and watched the notifications stack up. 47 missed calls in the span of 10 minutes. The screen was practically radiating their panic, their fury, and their desperate need to regain control. I calmly put my phone on silent and slid it into my tote bag. The gate agent announced the final boarding call for the flight to Seattle. I picked up my coffee, handed the agent my ticket, and walked down the jet bridge. Nobody on that plane had any idea that a dynasty was collapsing in a ballroom in Chicago, or that a bride was sobbing in front of high society. As I settled into my window seat, I pulled my phone out to switch it to airplane mode. But right before I did, one final text message vibrated onto the screen. It wasn't from Chloe. It wasn't from my parents. It was from Julian. Julian, Elena, this is Julian Sterling. I pulled yourself from the Ophelia contract. I apologize for texting you out of the blue. I paused, my thumb hovering over the screen as a second text loaded. Julian, I need to understand what just happened. Chloe is screaming in the bridal suite, but she refuses to explain the jewelry or the lies. She just keeps calling you crazy. A third text popped up. Julian, she spent the last 2 years convincing me you were severely mentally ill. She said you couldn't hold a job, that you were a pathological liar, and that your parents had to cut ties for their own safety. I believed her. I never once questioned it, and I never bothered to reach out to hear your side. That was a massive mistake. The flight attendant walked past, reminding everyone to secure their devices. I quickly read the final 2 messages. Julian, the reception is basically over. Half the room walked out after Evelyn spoke. My parents are interrogating your father, and he doesn't have any answers. I just wanted to say, I am incredibly sorry for believing her blindly. I'm sorry for whatever role I played in your exclusion today. I stared at the glowing text bubbles. Julian didn't know me, but he had enough integrity to apologize for being weaponized against me. I quickly typed out a response. Elena, thank you for reaching out, Julian. I hold absolutely no resentment toward you. Whatever happens with your relationship, I hope you find the truth you're looking for. His reply came instantly. Julian, the wedding happened, but I don't know if the marriage is going to survive the night. I am staying at a hotel. I need time to think. I locked my phone and shoved it deep into my bag as the plane accelerated down the runway. Time. It was the one currency my family had completely squandered. The flight back to Seattle was incredibly peaceful. I stared out at the blanket of clouds, processing the chaotic text messages, my father's demands, my mother's sudden interest in my income. But the truth was, I had absolutely nothing left to explain to them. I hadn't falsified those documents. I hadn't forced Chloe to hire my luxury firm. I hadn't done anything but deliver the exact truth that Grandma Beatrice had armed me with. Somewhere over the Midwest, I made a concrete vow to myself. I was not going to call Chloe back. I was not going to submit to my father's demands. I was done begging to be acknowledged. For 29 years, I had shrunk myself down to make their lives more comfortable. I had hoped that if I just became successful enough, they would finally love me. But I was officially done performing. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed a single sentence. I will not lock the door on them, but I refuse to stand here holding it open. They have to choose to walk through it. That was my new law. If Chloe wanted to offer a genuine, excuse-free apology, I would listen. If my parents wanted to actually meet the woman I became, they could try. But I was done chasing ghosts. By the time the plane touched down in Seattle, the morning sun was breaking over the mountains. It felt like the heavy, suffocating weight of my childhood had finally been left at the terminal. I didn't realize the situation had escalated globally until I walked into my studio the next morning. My assistant, Maya, was practically sprinting toward me holding an iPad. "Elena, please tell me you've seen this." She hit play on a TikTok video. It already had 2.5 million views. The giant text overlay read, "Rich bride exposed by millionaire sister." Someone sitting near the back of the ballroom had recorded the entire meltdown. The shaky footage captured Khloé screaming that the will was fake. It captured Evelyn Carmichael dropping the mic about the trophies versus memories. It captured Jonathan Royce casually revealing my $4.2 million revenue. And it perfectly captured Julian telling his bride to shut up. I scrolled through the top comments, utterly mesmerized. Grandma played the longest game of chess in history and won. The fact that she paid her sister $18K for flowers is the hardest flex I've ever seen. That bride's entire personality just got repossessed. "Your name is trending on Twitter," Maya whispered, eyes wide. "We've received over 400 new consultation requests since midnight. And the Chicago Tribune just emailed asking for an exclusive interview." I sat down heavily in my leather chair. I hadn't wanted this to become a public spectacle. I didn't set up the camera. I just wanted my family to see me. But now millions of strangers were seeing them for exactly who they were. "Decline all media requests," I told Maya. "And cancel my afternoon meetings. I need to brace myself." Because I knew my family wasn't going to let this go quietly. 3 days later, the elevator doors to my penthouse studio chimed, and my mother walked out. She looked entirely out of her element. She was wearing her standard Chanel blazer and pearls, but her posture was totally defeated. Her eyes were bloodshot and swollen. She stood near the entryway, staring in awe at the massive floral installations, the bustling team of designers, and the panoramic views of the city. "Elena," she asked softly when I stepped out of my office. This entire floor is yours?" "Yes, Mom," I said, my voice neutral. "You never said a word. You never asked." She physically recoiled at the truth. I ushered her into my private office and shut the glass door. She sat tentatively on the edge of the guest chair, her hands trembling in her lap. "I flew out here because we need to discuss what happened," she started, her voice shaking. "I assumed you pulled some sort of cruel prank. How could you humiliate your sister on the biggest day of her life?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my desk. "I wasn't even in the room, Mom. She humiliated herself. She spent months bragging about a multi-million-dollar jewelry collection she didn't own. She lied to her fiancé, telling him I was a deranged failure. My gift was just the truth. What she did with it was her choice." My mother's face twisted in anguish. "Mom," I continued, keeping my tone perfectly even. "For nearly 30 years, I was completely invisible in your house. I am not demanding an apology today. I just want you to be honest with yourself for 5 minutes." My mother stopped looking at me and slowly surveyed my office. She looked at the framed magazine covers on the wall. She looked at the prestigious business awards. And then her eyes landed on a small, silver-framed photo on my desk. It was me and Grandma Beatrice, laughing together on her 80th birthday. My mother stared at her mother's face, and then she completely broke. She didn't just cry. She sobbed. Deep, ugly, chest-heaving sobs that she had spent her entire life repressing. "We failed you," she choked out, burying her face in her hands. "God, Elena, I failed you so badly." I sat still. I let the silence hold the space she needed. Khloé was she was so loud, my mother wept. She demanded all the oxygen in the room. She threw tantrums if she wasn't the center of the universe. And you were just so quiet. You entertained yourself. You never begged for attention. I convinced myself that meant you were fine. I stopped begging. I corrected her gently because I realized you were never going to answer. She let out a wounded gasp. I thought we were giving Khloé more attention because she was fragile, because she needed it. But that was a lie. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. She needed it because we spoiled her into a monster. And you learned to be quiet because we taught you that your voice didn't matter. I didn't validate her with a hug, but I didn't throw her out either. Beatrice tried to warn me, my mother whispered. She told me I was going to lose you. I thought she was just being dramatic. I don't expect you to ever forgive me, Elena. But seeing this, seeing who you became without us, I understand now. I nodded slowly. It's a start, Mom. Before she left to catch her flight, she gave me the casualty report from Chicago. Julian had officially canceled the honeymoon to Bora Bora. He moved into a downtown hotel and told Chloe he needed serious time to decide if he wanted to file for an annulment. The viral TikTok had leaked to Chloe's corporate office. Her marketing firm called an emergency HR meeting and placed her on an indefinite leave of absence to avoid brand contamination. And worst of all for Chloe, Julian's old money parents had launched a full investigation into her background. They called my father, demanding to know what else Chloe had fabricated. When Chloe tried to claim Grandma Beatrice was senile when she signed the will, Evelyn Carmichael stepped in and shut her down with the truth. Chloe had lost the $3.1 million jewels. She lost her husband's trust. She lost her elite job. And she lost the fake persona she had spent 3 decades building. She blames you for all of it, my mother said sadly at the door. She says you planned to ruin her. I didn't plan to ruin anything, I replied. I just stopped hiding. A week after my mother left, I took an afternoon off and visited the high-security bank vault downtown. The Beatrice collection was waiting for me inside a heavy steel lockbox. I carefully unrolled the velvet displays. There were 12 breathtaking pieces. A diamond collar necklace from the Roaring Twenties. Platinum and sapphire drop earrings. A massive emerald brooch that belonged to European royalty. I ran my fingers over the cold stones, feeling the weight of the history Beatrice so desperately wanted to protect. Chloe would have worn these to country clubs just to make other women feel inferior. But Beatrice knew I saw the art in them. I signed the paperwork that afternoon to loan the 9 most significant pieces to the Chicago Art Institute, where they would be displayed in the vintage jewelry wing with a bronze plaque reading, "The Beatrice Legacy Collection." The remaining 3 pieces went back into the vault for the day I eventually have children of my own. As the bank manager was closing out the paperwork, he slid a tiny, sealed envelope across the table. "Miss Vance, this was tucked under the velvet lining. We almost missed it." I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Beatrice, wrapped around a cheap, imitation pearl bracelet. "My sweet Elena, I never told you this, but I did leave something for Chloe. This was my childhood play bracelet. It possesses absolutely zero monetary value, but it holds immense emotional worth if she is ever capable of understanding the difference. I pray that one day she figures it out. Forever proud of you, Grandma." I stood in the fluorescent light of the bank lobby and smiled through my tears. Even from the grave, Beatrice was trying to teach my sister a lesson. Maybe one day Chloe would be ready to receive it. It has been 6 months since the wedding disaster. I am still living in Seattle, still running Ophelia Blooms, and still expanding the empire they said I couldn't build. The viral video eventually died down, replaced by the next internet drama. But my real life is fundamentally different now. My mother calls me every Sunday. The conversations are awkward, full of long pauses, but she actually asks me about my employees and my design projects. She listens. It's fragile, but it's real. My father sent me a 3-page handwritten letter last month. He didn't make excuses. He just apologized for his blindness. I haven't replied yet, but I keep the letter in my desk drawer. I'll write back when I'm ready. Chloe and Julian didn't annul the marriage, but they are currently in intensive couples counseling. Chloe actually called me a few weeks ago. It wasn't a perfect apology, but the venom was gone. She just said, "I'm trying to figure out why I am the way I am." I told her I wished her luck. If I've learned anything from this entire nightmare, it's that the ultimate revenge isn't screaming or destroying someone's life. True power is building something undeniable. It's forging a life so solid and knowing your own worth so deeply that nobody's delusion can ever touch you. I didn't go to that wedding to break my sister. I went to finally introduce myself. So, I turn it over to you. Have you ever had to draw a brutal line in the sand with toxic family members? What did it cost you to walk away, and what did you build in the aftermath? Share your stories in the comments below. I'll be reading and replying to as many as I can, because sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is pack your bags and stop participating in their game. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. If this story resonated with you, hit the subscribe button and send this video to someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. And if you're craving more drama, click the video on the screen right now. Until next time, remember, you don't need their permission to be magnificent. See you in the next one.